Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the 4 o'clock news and politics show. The snow has just about stopped here in downtown Providence. It's still a little wet and wild out there, so if you're hitting the roads, be careful, give yourself a little more time. But I'd like to welcome my first guest in, David Caprio, President and CEO of Children's Friend.
Thank you very much. Thanks. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you back in studio again for all the work that you do in the community. You're going to be up at the State House next week,
Yes.
looking particularly at testifying about the DCYF funding level and just where things are at. We know DCYF is in crisis right now, and they're looking to level fund it.
Yes, that's what we're really concerned about, Kate. As you said, there's, we see the headlines all the time lately for the past couple of years about child deaths, young kids in Rhode Island dying because of abuse and neglect. And we've seen this too often over the past 2 years. And yet DCYF took a $7 million budget cut in the current year, and they're looking to level fund it, which means that $7 million cut also carries into 2019. And what we're trying to say to people is these funding cuts and these budget cuts are absolutely linked to the bad outcomes that we are having in our child welfare system right now.
And DCYF just simply overburdened? Is the lack of staffing, just the inability to monitor, to keep tabs on these, oftentimes tenuous and difficult situations?
Right, so DCYF only gets called into the worst situations, and they really have to, in many cases, work miracles. And if they don't have enough resources, and if their staff is spread too thin, they can't get the job done. So we really need to resource this agency. Again, they only get called into the worst situations. We need to make sure that they have the resources to be able to do their job.
Let's talk again about level funding and the crisis facing the state here. We see the outrage and the sadness of every time there is a child fatality. We see elected officials say we can't let this happen. This is one child death is too many. And then we see it level funded. Is there a lack of, how can both the administration putting forth this budget proposal, and there's other elected officials who I'm sure are advocating for a funding increase, for the most vulnerable? Are we failing the most vulnerable in our state?
I believe we are. And I don't believe that anybody wants to, so I don't believe that the governor's budget or the General Assembly is looking for bad outcomes. They obviously are outraged like the rest of us when we have a bad outcome. I'm not sure that they have tied together that the budget directly impacts these bad outcomes. And that's what we're trying to get the message to people, that if DCYF is underfunded and continues to be underfunded, then we are going to continue to have these bad outcomes, which none of us want. And that's what needs to change.
And talk with us a little bit, we've had you here in studio before, David, about Children's Friend and your role in helping families in need across the state.
Sure. So Children's Friend is the oldest social service agency in the state, founded back in 1834, back in the India Point section of Providence, before there was a DCYF, before our government got involved in child welfare. And basically what we did at Children's Friend is we took abused and neglected and abandoned kids off the street. We gave them housing, but our founder also educated them. And so they had a safe place. They were getting an education for their future. And to this day, we still do adoption and foster care. But we also do a lot more now of community-based prevention work. We really try to work with families in their communities. We try to keep kids with their families, keep kids safe, keep families stable, and then, really they never enter the child welfare system, which is really a great outcome. But we still do work with that population that is in the child welfare system, and that's what we're really focused on right now, is let's get better outcomes for these kids.
And is that really at the crux of the issue of DCYF? Is it the staffing? You, I'm sure, work with DCYF all the time. Again, these workers there, I'm sure, have caseloads that are just overwhelming. Is that just the start of what really needs to be done to fix the problem?
I think the staffing, although the staffing has been addressed a little bit, I think there's still more staff that need to be added in certain areas, but resources in general, because you can have staff there, but they may have high caseloads. You may not have enough community providers or enough services in the community that can assist DCYF with the work they do. But I think over the past decade or so, you could pretty much put into 3 general buckets of what the issues are with our child welfare system and why we've had some of the bad outcomes. I think first is inconsistent leadership over at DCYF. We've had lots of different directors come in and go, and some of them have been more effective than others. I think we have a great director who's been here about a year. She has some great ideas. She's very qualified for the position. She's listening to the community. She's listening to her staff, and I think she really wants to make some of the needed changes. The problem is it's under-resourced. So I think the second biggest issue that has affected DCYF is that it's under-resourced, and it has consistently been under-resourced, and we're worried about that continuing. We have a great new director. Let's give her the resources that she needs to invest in the system and get better outcomes for our kids. And I think the third issue is, none of us live in isolation, and substance abuse and the opioid crisis absolutely has an impact on families and families with young kids, and we've seen some of that in some of these bad outcomes also.
So you're going to be up testifying at the DCYF hearing for the funding level. Any other legislative priorities this session that you're looking at as well?
Sure. So, I mean, by far, protecting our most vulnerable kids is the number one priority we have. This is a life or death situation for some of these kids, so that's our number one. But certainly, we're very interested in some of the early child care proposals. Again, getting the youngest kids and getting them learning and getting them to school at the same level as some of their more affluent peers is very important to us. So I think there's some great investments proposed in pre-K and in early childhood programs and in child care rates, all things that will help a lot of kids in our state. So we're focused on that too. But our number one priority is protecting kids in the child welfare system.
So you talk about last year taking that $7 million cut. Is that the basis point for, when you're up there and saying, don't level fund following this cut year, is it kind of reinstating at least that $7 million?
That's exactly what we're asking. We're asking, as a first step to this director, to give her a great start. Let's get that $7 million back in the system. So we're asking the General Assembly to put that $7 million back into the budget. It's not in the governor's proposed budget. It needs to be added in. And we're asking, all of our friends and supporters out there and all the people concerned with child welfare in the state to contact your state rep, contact your state representative, contact your state senator, and ask them, please, make this a priority in the budget. We need to increase the DCYF budget by $7 million, and that will help us reduce these terrible outcomes that we're achieving.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time to come into the studio today to tell viewers about this from the government relations perspective, because again, you see the stories, you see the headlines, you see the heartache, and you're really putting the policy side associated with it. Again, you can contact David Caprio and Children's Friend if you support what they are looking to do up at the General Assembly. Well, I appreciate your taking the time to come in, give us an update. Again, you'll be up there next week. We'll continue to follow the developments there with DCYF, but with all the work that you do in the community, David, I appreciate your taking the time to come in.
Thank you for the time, and thank you for all the attention you put on this.
Of course, David Caprio. Thank you so much. I'll let you go around the corner, and we'll welcome our next guest into the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Don't go anywhere. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for this rainy Friday afternoon news and politics show. We have a full one for you. I want to thank David Caprio with Children's Friend for coming in to talk about the testimony he's going to give next week pertaining to funding for DCYF. And I'd like to welcome my next guest, regular Bob Wickham.
Hello, Kate.
Thanks for coming in. I am good, and wanted to start off actually by talking about what I just spoke with David Caprio about. Last year, they cut funding for DCYF by $7 million.
Yeah.
This year, they're level funding, which he says, perpetuates that cut that they already incurred.
They had cuts starting way back in the Great Recession, didn't they? Isn't that when all this started? I think so. Yeah. Everything was devastated. We'll have another recession soon. We can do it again.
Well, DCYF, we see these horrible stories of child deaths and
Child abuse.
Child abuse. an understaffed DCYF that's not able to keep tabs on.
It's impossible. We're asking them to do too much, really.
Is there any, I mean, do you think
Well,
this will ever be fixed?
Well, if they raise taxes. But that's tough to do. It all depends on revenue to pay the salaries, to pay for all the other stuff that goes into looking out for these people. And also, I think, it takes social change, too. This is a very dysfunctional society in many ways. There's a very high incidence of drug abuse. A lot of kids are born out of wedlock, which makes them more vulnerable to bad stuff. It's a rather chaotic society.
So you talk about raising taxes, obviously. We have so
yeah.
many needs and only a finite amount of money.
Yeah.
Are you optimistic that we're going to see increased revenues under this Trump tax cut?
No, not going to happen. Not going to. We've been down this road. I think there'll be a little kind of a goose, even though you wouldn't know today from what the stock market was saying, which I'm sure you checked in on earlier today. You've been bankrupted. It's like the old joke: how did you go bankrupt? First gradually, then suddenly.
Well, was this just a matter of time? Let's talk about the markets then.
Yeah.
Is this the correction we've all been waiting for?
Well, yeah, I think I think too many people want to blame this on Trump. Yeah, he should keep his big trap shut about tariffs and stuff. This is not a good idea. But I think a lot of this, and I think you and I have talked about this the last year or two, is just the market, I believe, is overpriced. That doesn't mean it's not going to go up 1,200 points tomorrow. It may well, but overall, it's too high. It's been going up since the end of the Great Recession. Actually, it's been going up since late winter, early spring of 2009,
Yes.
basically. Okay, and this can't go on forever.
So giving Trump too much credit and also too
I
much
mean,
blame.
some of these are just things that are out of his hand. I think he's making it worse by this sort of erratic stuff. It's not so much his opinions, is that he's so crazy, so demagogic, so impulsive, that it's very difficult for business or for governments that we're negotiating with to have any idea what to do. And this is not good for business confidence. If you think the leader of the free world is erratic, this isn't good just for planning. If I were running a big company like GE, the idea that you'd have an unstable, narcissistic president of the United States would not fill me with confidence.
Well, we've seen how the market behaved today.
Yeah, and it could go, it could go up. What's it, Friday? It could go up on Monday. I think overall, though, I think it's overpriced, and I'm not the only one who thinks that. As you know, so,
Speaking of Fridays, an interesting development that took place today, and GoLocal sent out the second round of e-blast pertaining to the state releasing the Amazon HQ2 proposal, 127 pages, but
no dollars.
no dollars.
Yeah, I thought that was very strange. I glanced at some of that stuff. I think it's. I'm not sure what is their argument for not releasing the numbers.
We did hear from Commerce. They said that because they still have ongoing potential to work with Amazon to get some of the ancillary, if potentially it goes to Boston.
I suppose that's somewhat plausible. Still, the main negotiation to get the second headquarters, which I never believed. There were dollar numbers given there for incentives, and that negotiation is over. I would think they'd be able to release.
Do you think this is a little, we keep advocating for transparent government, and especially now in an election year, people really want to know what the bread and butter of the administration is and how they try to lure companies in with how much in taxpayer incentives.
Well, I think you raised sort of a broader point we've talked about, admittedly, which is, I think, having those numbers, not just the sort of other ideas involved, like putting in the Superman building.
The big A. The big A.
The big A. That's certainly interesting and all that, but we really do need to know the numbers, too, to get a better sense, to get a clearer sense of what is the overall economic development policy and philosophy of the governor and her administration. And I think for that you really do need some numbers. Now, I fully agree you can't release a lot of this stuff while the negotiation is underway. You really can't do that. It really screws it up. It could just sabotage the whole thing. Having said all that, the main part of the negotiation, which was to get the second headquarters, though again I thought that was implausible, is over. I think there is a good chance that they'll get at least a bit of the Amazon business. I mean, Amazon is already about to employ 2,000 people in Boston. Even without the second headquarters. You see that?
I saw that, yes.
Huge thing. So I think, especially given the commuting nightmare in Boston, the congestion and all that, and because we have a couple of distinguished colleges, universities here in Providence. We've got trains to get between here and Boston.
We could get some of it.
We could get some of it. In fact, I think we probably will get some of it, but a few hundred people. But I really do wish for our public understanding of the Raimondo administration's philosophy, I really wish we'd seen some numbers in there. In other words, what were they willing to offer?
What were they putting on the table,
Right. What
so
were
to
they putting
speak?
on the table?
Well, let's not go far from Amazon, because earlier this week I had Merrill Brown, one of
Oh,
GoLocal
yeah,
24's
I think I may
investors
meet him
and,
next week in
and board
Washington.
members, talking about all the flux in the media world, talking about Sinclair, talking about Facebook. But his parting shot when we were talking was the president's treatment of Amazon and Bezos in the Washington Post. In your opinion, is the president going overboard with Bezos?
Yes, I think he is. And you could make arguments that the Postal Service could maybe get more money out of Amazon, even though it should be said Amazon has sort of been a savior for the Postal Service, because as the snail mail has gone away to be replaced by email, they've lost a tremendous amount of their revenue.
But people are shipping stuff and buying stuff.
People are shipping stuff more than ever, and Amazon ships a lot of its stuff through the Postal Service. Everybody thinks it's UPS or FedEx. That's not true. So it's been great. Maybe they could get a better deal, but it's been something of a godsend for them so far.
Until the drones start dropping the stuff.
On our heads. I think what Trump is trying to do is somehow connect the Washington Post, which is not owned by Amazon, by the way. It's owned by Bezos, not this big public company called Amazon, and he's trying to undermine them because they are doing what the previous ownerships of the Washington Post did, which was cover Washington intensely, and especially the administration. And he doesn't like that. He only wants nice things to be said about him, as most of us do. But if you're president, you have to be willing to take some negative stuff. So he's basically trying to undermine the Washington Post by gluing it to Amazon and these mostly false statements he's making about Amazon allegedly ripping off the Postal Service.
It was an interesting vantage point from Merrill Brown this week when we had him in studio. Glad to have you here. Do you want to give folks a little bit of a preview of this weekend?
Oh, what are we talking? Well, I talk about Sinclair, which owns Channel 10 here in Providence. I think do they own a TV station in Maine or something? Anyway, they want to buy a whole bunch more. They want to buy Tribune Media, which has a whole bunch of stations, and if they do buy it, the new behemoth would cover about 73% of the broadcast markets in the United States. I don't think that would be a good thing. I think the business of Sinclair, ordering its people to deliver basically pro-Trump editorials, I'm kind of blasé about that. There's nothing new about ownership of media companies ordering their local properties to say nice things.
So do you think it's just Deadspin being able to put it together so succinctly in that way, and then just the slightly off repetition, and they all come into...
Right. It was very funny, that graphic, they're all saying the same thing at the same time.
I think that's what it was. It wasn't the script itself. I think it was seeing it all in that
uniformity
one
of it,
place.
The automation.
The sort of,
The automation. That actually didn't I thought it was sort of funny. And they've got this guy called Boris, who's sort of friendly, as you'd expect with the Russians, who's delivering these sort of alleged anti-terrorist diatribes that kind of connected to the Trump administration.
Threat to our democracy.
A threat to our democracy. But that doesn't bother me so much as kind of the underlying problem in the American media, which is the companies are too big. And they should be broken up. And of course, the two biggest media companies should be broken up are Google and Facebook. And I think that's much more of a danger to our democracy and to our free market, that so many of these local outlets are owned by the same people.
Well, you certainly got the media perspective, so if you've been seeing stuff about Sinclair, be sure to read Bob Whitcomb's column this weekend. Any other tidbit you want to entice people with?
Let me see. Something I'm going to talk about, I think, but probably not in a week. There's an interesting story about UMass buying up local little colleges. There are too many, a lot of people, economists and academics, think there are too many little private colleges in New England. A lot of them are failing.
Did you see Mount Ida?
Mount Ida, that's right, being taken over by UMass. And I think this is sort of a way forward for a lot of these institutions, of which, again, I think there are too many. They really have no economic raison d'etre, as they say in cocktail parties.
Or as someone who spends some time in France.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you're giving us a little heads up as to what we
Yeah.
can expect this coming weekend. You can read Bob Whitcomb on Go Local Prov on Sundays, and of course, see him here in studio when we can get him.
Oh,
Bob Whitcomb.
can I slide one thing?
One more thing.
URI, I think it was great. They picked the associate head coach to take over as the head coach, a wonderfully conservative, in the old sense of the word, respectable, old-fashioned promotion instead of hiring a celebrity, whose name I will not mention.
We'll have more on URI to come
Okay.
here at Go Local. But Bob Whitcomb, thank you so much for coming into the
Okay.
studio.
Happy weekend.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our next guest here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Go Local News editor Kate Nagel. I'd like to welcome my next guest into the studio, Claudia Morandi. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Because there is an event taking place both here in Rhode Island tomorrow and all across the country. This is the Don't Punish the Pain Rally. Now this is taking a look at opioid use from the patient perspective and what's happened since the CDC has issued new regulations to doctors. Now the patients are speaking up who experience pain, need pain management, and this is coming from their perspective. So Claudia, tell us your story about being involved with this rally.
So back in November, I decided that as a chronic pain patient, I needed to do something for the chronic pain patients across the state. So I decided, let's do a nationwide rally. We started with 5, now we have thousands and thousands, and tomorrow in each state, they're going to be rallying at their capital. What happened was when the CDC instituted guidelines back in 2016, the guidelines greatly affected pain patients. And we have 100 million chronic pain patients that need opioids, which has now become a vulgar 4-letter word. But the fact of the matter is these people have never jeopardized their medication and they're being penalized. What's happening in Rhode Island, across the country, primary care physicians will no longer treat your chronic pain. They have to go to pain management centers, which many times in the southern states they don't exist. So the CDC, while they're trying to address one epidemic, they've created another. And we're in a bad place. We need our senators to, come forward, support the chronic pain patients. Everybody knows somebody who's sick, who's got cancer, unfortunately. And the list just goes on and on with horrible illnesses that they're being neglected, especially our veterans.
And so as you said, you talk about opioids and the opioid crisis, again, being seen as that 4-letter word. But as you mentioned, plenty of responsible patients and usage of it, and the CDC, as you've mentioned, has gone, as you think, too far.
Right.
So do the regulations need to be revisited? I mean, what's the ultimate hope? You're raising awareness around this, saying there's chronic pain patients that need this to be addressed.
Right.
Is the hope that, again, it happens at that federal level, saying, well, let's take a step back, and I'm going to bring you step over here, too, just to say, hey, look, these are the voices that also need to be heard in this conversation.
Right.
What's your ultimate hope that CDC and doctors, can move forward with this now?
Right. Well, I don't think the CDC under this administration is going to say, oops, sorry, we made a mistake. But I think what needs to be addressed, especially, I want to protect Rhode Island. I've suffered from severe Crohn's disease 4 years ago, I lived in a hospital. Pain management was introduced into my life. I'm an advocate, I'm an author, I'm a fitness competitor. We need to tailor the guidelines. We
Okay.
need to back our primary care physicians. Say, look, it's okay. Treat those patients with compassion. When your patient comes out of surgery, don't make them suffer. Don't make them howl. Pain does kill. What's going to happen? They're going to hit the streets. And, you know, they're desperate. I've got people with hydrocephalus. They're suffering horribly. We need a federal solution. If, you know, protect your state. I always tell people, reach out to your senators. But more importantly, we need the DEA to back off a little. They've created such a fear in the medical community. And also, we don't have enough pain medication, IV. If we were to have a horrible catastrophic event, we simply don't have enough medication because of the limitations. They forced manufacturers to stop by 25%. We're not in a good place.
So talk with us a little bit about the event tomorrow, the nuts and bolts, time, information, things that people who are watching right now,
Okay.
who this might resonate with. We'll
Sure.
have links up as well when
Right.
we publish this piece, but just let folks know a little bit more about tomorrow.
Okay, so tomorrow, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 48 states. Unfortunately, I couldn't address Alaska and Hawaii. If you go to the Don't Punish Pain page on Facebook, you can find your flyer. Head to your state's capital. Everybody will be rallying. Some will be rallying all day. They're going to have, it's a public information session in certain states. At Rhode Island, at the State House tomorrow from 12 to 2, I'm hosting the New England rally for Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut. So it's a place where we can gather, support one another, and you know, it's step one in a process that's going to take years. So that's where we are tomorrow, and I hope it's the beginning of a change.
Raising the awareness. Have you had conversations with the offices of the federal delegation?
Well, I've met with Senator Whitehouse's office. They've been wonderful to work with, and Senator Whitehouse would make a statement, but he wants a solution. I don't have a solution. Palliative care would be a great solution. What's interesting is the Human Rights Watch Commission is now doing an investigation, so we know there's a problem. For human rights to intervene, they've been bombarded. Thousands and thousands and thousands of stories have resonated, so much so that they've opened up an investigation. Their grants for 6 months, and they're addressing it. So nobody really wants to step forward because it's that horrible opioid vulgar word.
Well, I appreciate your coming in today to provide this perspective because it hasn't really, you're in the community, you know it, but
Right.
for the general public, again, hearing about this opioid crisis has to know that there's an other side to this, and these are
Sure.
patients who use opioids, use them responsibly. And as you mentioned too, if they can't get them, the unfortunate reality of going to alternative sources, and you said going to the streets.
Oh yeah, many already have, sadly, in the southern states. The southern states have been hit horribly, and people are scrambling, and they reach out, where can I go for pain management, and my doctor won't help me. It's a horrible, it's almost, we refer to it as medical manslaughter because the government has created this problem, and with all of these guidelines, the overdosing rate has only dropped slightly, maybe by 2%. Prohibition is not the answer. Prohibition will never be the answer. There will always be overdosing with alcohol, with nicotine, with ice cream. I mean, if we're gonna, let's outlaw, let's go after the nicotine. Let's go after chocolate ice cream. Let's put a Band-Aid on everything. So I empathize with all those who have lost a loved one to the illicit fentanyl epidemic. I've got children, nobody wants their child to, or an adult to get hooked on pain medication. But the fact is, people who were born with an illness such as mine rely on opioids to wake up and contribute to society. And I like to pay it forward because I'm not in the hospital any longer. I lived 20 years in the hospital, so we just can't get rid of sick people because they're a burden on the community. You know, to rob people of their ability to live a life with dignity, it's vile behavior.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time to both come in here, provide the perspective, and give some information about tomorrow's event taking place here in Rhode Island and around the country. We'll provide more information and links that you can read on golocalprop.com. Claudia Morandi, thank you so much
Thanks
for
a
taking the
bunch.
time to come in. I'll let you go around the corner.
Great.
And we'll be right back with our next guest here
Thank you.
in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us this Friday for news and politics. And I've got a news story for you. I'd like to welcome my next guest in, Alan Gianfrancesco, better known as Alan Francis in the industry, reupholstering probably to the stars, if you will.
A bit to the stars,
A
yes.
bit to the stars, and you have got a very interesting story about someone of some notoriety here in New England that you are doing some work on. So why don't we tell folks about your involvement with the Lizzie Borden House?
I got a phone call about a year ago from the folks that run the Lizzie Borden House, and they needed someone to do the antique restoration on all their upholstered antiques. So I went and had a little meeting with them, and we started on the project, taking a couple of pieces out at a time. Of course, because it's a bed and breakfast, they couldn't very well empty everything into my store and have it sit there forever. So we've been doing 2 or 3 pieces at a time, and the project is just about at its end at this point. And the last piece that we took an order on about a week ago, and I'm waiting for the fabric to come in, is the sofa that she allegedly murdered her father on.
The state of the sofa, are the stains out? I mean, what's the state of
It's been reupholstered after the fact, so there's really nothing, there's no DNA to be had in that piece, I don't think, but we'll find out when we crack it open.
So, tell me your thoughts when you were contacted by the house. I mean, this is something that of such lore in New England, and of course, open to the public, very much a tourist destination, if you will. But I mean, you knew you were up for the challenge. I mean, how do you reupholster it to look just like it did? Do you tweak it slightly? I mean, how does one go about this process?
Well, very interesting, because the murders were the first crime scene photos ever taken in the United States. So there were never photos done before. So we went back and looked at those pictures and tried to reproduce fabrics as closely as we possibly could to what was there. Now, Mr. Borden owned a furniture store, and he was considered to be kind of a tightwad. So whatever didn't sell in his furniture store, he brought home. So nothing matched. As a decorator, I'm used to going in and making everything look right with everything else.
But you've got a hodgepodge to begin with.
And the hodgepodge just continued because we didn't coordinate. We tried to get it to look like it did back in 1892 when the murders happened.
So is this, again, in your history of of your work, is this one of the more interesting projects you've worked on?
Oh, definitely.
But you've got others, I'm sure, you can tell.
Well, we've got a lot of others. We are in business for 70 years this year. My father started the business in 1948. So we've done a lot of interesting work for a lot of different clients. We've got a client list of probably about 3,000 people at this point.
Oh my goodness.
But it's not, sometimes you don't see people for 20 years. And that's the way it is. You do something and then off you go, and eventually they come back, or their children. We're doing work for grandkids of people my father did work for. So it's been interesting.
It's, to get this and have to go through the reupholstery process. Talk with us a little bit about it. I mean, it's such a trade, and, as someone who might bring something in and have some ideas and then see the final product.
Right.
How many folks are working there? What's the approach to, let's talk about this settee?
First of all, my staff. I've got 3 great people that work for me. My head upholsterer, Ryan, who does all the real fine work and has been doing most of this project, has been with me for 20 years. And in terms of his workmanship, I'll put him up against anyone in the business. He's really fantastic. Teresa and Phil also have been with me for quite a while, and they're really great employees. They do a wonderful, wonderful job. To the point where I can hand off fabrics and just walk away and they do the project, and I don't worry about the outcome because they're that good. But with pieces that date back as far as these go, and they're all around 1860, 1870 in that era, they're a mess. Because when you and I get old like that, we'll be a mess too. So they require a lot more work than the average piece of furniture. We go right down to the bare frame, do woodwork, tighten the whole frame, retie all the springs, replace padding if we have to, and we usually do, because don't forget, back then, everything was natural fibers. So straw, hog's hair, horse hair, that all disintegrates after a period of time, and when we open them up, dust falls on the floor. So we're replacing all the fillings. We try to use as much in the way of original fillings as possible to keep it as authentic as can be. And I carry a complete range of fabrics that date back to that era.
Oh, so you've got the actual historic fabrics.
Yes.
Where does one get the historic fabrics?
All the different fabric companies I deal with will have everything from mid-century to Victorian to Art Deco to current materials. And the books just roll in the door, and when I am going to a certain type of project, I just bring those books along with me.
Anything else you want folks to know about the business? You know, this very interesting job with the Lizzie Borden House is why I want to bring you in, because it's not every day you get this type of phone call.
No, it is not.
But as you said, you know, the client base of several thousand. But what else would you like folks to know about the business?
We do anything for the home and fabric. Window treatments, carpeting, slipcovers, bedspreads, wallpaper, paint consultation, design consultation, wall-to-wall carpeting, area rugs. Anything that can be done in fabric, we do it. Commercial, residential. I do all the upholstery work for Miriam Hospital. So we've got some pretty good commercial accounts as well. And the commercial accounts are no fun, though. Working for people in their homes, the satisfaction, the attention to detail, those are the projects that I really enjoy.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come in. We'll provide some pictures for you of this project if you come back to GoLocalProv.com to check it out this weekend. Alan Gianfrancesco, better known as Alan Francis, I appreciate your taking the time to come in. I'll let you go around the corner.
All right, Kate.
Okay, thanks so much, Alan. Take care. That just about wraps up another day here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. We started off at 2 with the Alex and Ani Lounge, had live music, Molly O'Brien at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, news and politics. We'll have plenty more for you on GoLocalProv.com over the weekend. Check us out on Facebook as well. And we'll be back in studio on Monday. So Business Monday, Lifestyle, we look forward to seeing you back here and wish everyone a great weekend. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel.